about a minute or two for some other attendees to hop on. So thank you for being early, and we'll be starting in just about a minute or two. Again, I see a lot of new people jumping on. Thank you. We're going to start in just about a minute, probably 2 minutes after the top of the hour. So if you want to just make sure your audio is working fine. Okay, folks, thanks. I think we'll get started. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Jim Adams, and I'm the Vice President of Worldwide Sales here at Ed Lumen. We thank you for taking time out of your day, wherever you are in the country. So probably good morning or good afternoon to some. This is another one of our monthly series, thought leadership series of webinars conducted by Ed Lumen. If you're not familiar with Ed Lumen, if this is your first time joining us in these sessions, we are going to spend a little bit of time at the end of the session talking about who we are and some of the solutions that we provide to our customers and to our partners. Before we get going, and just a couple of housekeeping items. First of all, you might have noticed that you have been muted when you joined, so everybody will be on mute. If you do have a question, you can use some of the icon controls to either raise your hand or there is a chat window. We are going to have a Q&A session at the end of our discussion and our interview with Robert Johnston. So if you have a question, you might want to think about that. You can either put it in the Q&A panel, or at the end of the session, again, we'll open it up and see if people have questions. This session is being recorded. So if you want to listen to the session later on and or share it with your colleagues, please feel free to do so. Everybody who attended the session today will get a replay link when we're done with the session. So with that, let's get going and introduce what our topic is today. So our session today is about the Colonial Pipeline breach. And really what we want to do is give us some perspective as to what happened with that breach. That's really been all over the news. That's got an awful lot of attention. And maybe we'll demystify some of the things and clear up some of the myths and rumors, but also give you some context and perspective as to what happened and how we might collectively learn from that breach to better protect ourselves, whether you're a customer or whether you're a partner who's on the call today. We'll start with some introductions. We have our guest speaker today is Robert Johnston, who's the CEO of Ed Lumen, and actually an industry known expert in incident response. You may have seen him on CNBC or MSNBC or in various trade publications, and we'll introduce Rob. And we'll spend the majority of our time having an interview and a conversation with Rob and get his professional perspective and his expert perspective on what happened. We'll talk a little bit about some next steps, and then as I mentioned earlier, we'll have a Q&A session, so if you have questions, again, feel free to ask. So with that, let's introduce our guest speaker, Robert Johnston, who is the CEO of Ed Lumen. You know, Rob's got a really, really interesting background. I'll summarize, but then Rob, I'm going to have you spend a little time. So Robert spent time in the military. He spent time at the NSA as an incident responder. He spent time in private industry as an incident responder principal incident responder for CrowdStrike, where he was responsible for the investigation of the Democratic National Committee breach, which you may have heard about in the past, and also the Joint Chief of Staff breach. So Rob is a well-respected expert in IR and has, as I mentioned before, been interviewed on MSNBC and CNBC and a number of various outlets. So Rob, really interesting background, really cool things you've done over your career. If you could kind of give us a sense of, what you've been doing over your career and what led you to this moment.
Well, my career definitely started in the Marine Corps, as you suggested. I graduated from the Naval Academy in 2008. I joined the Marine Corps. I entered into cybersecurity really right away. Spent the majority of my career in the Marines in cybersecurity. I got to do some interesting things there. I got to, I got to lead the Marine Corps Red Team and do red teaming of hacking our own classified and unclassified networks to make them stronger. I got to do incident response for the National Security Agency, doing mostly counter-Russian threat IRs, which was really exciting. I left government service. I went to CrowdStrike, and I was doing incident response services engagements at CrowdStrike, and had the opportunity to use some really unique incident responses there. Everything from small biotech companies up to, of course, the Democratic National Committee and big breaches like that today. I left CrowdStrike and founded my own company at the time based on, the utilization of serverless analytics in specifically the security analytics segment of the cybersecurity market, and bringing that serverless analytics component to the SIEM market, which is where we sit today and where we help our customers achieve their security and compliance objectives today as well.
So Rob, that's great. And I want to just, before we get into the Colonial Pipeline, so you talked a little bit about Ed Lumen. Again, what were the things that you were hoping to accomplish when you started Ed Lumen?
Yeah, I come from an engineering background, of course, is my engineering background, and I wanted to do a couple of things. Well, the first, from an engineering, putting my engineering hat on, was to bring serverless analytics to the SIEM space, right? Which traditionally, it's, serverless analytics, frankly, even today, is only like 5-6 years old. So it's very new technology, but it's rapidly growing, and there are certain advantages to serverless analytics, right? One is cost for processing goes way down. One is in the cloud, of course, with data lake technology, data storage, is more commoditized, and it's easier to integrate in with, this processing engine. And so, this has unique applications in certain areas, right? Mainly in the ability to consume large amounts of data, process it very quickly, and use data science to find threats, malfunctions, and IT operations failures. And so we spent a lot of time in the very beginning of the company building Adlumin and building the Adlumin platform and technology to use all of those very cloud native technology stacks inside of our overall software, which, I feel like a lot of customers maybe now even take for granted that when they log into the portal, there actually is this kind of massive apparatus that sits behind this portal. I almost think the ease of use of the portal doesn't do the beauty of the Mona Lisa that's sitting behind it any justice. But saying that, I'm a little biased, engineer at heart, but that was really, why we started Adlumin, was to bring that, that serverless analytics component and make it consumable and usable very easily with the security space.
You're hiding complexity with simplicity, which is wonderful. If for some, if there's a little bit of an echo, I apologize. I don't know if you're hearing it on your side, but so that's great, Rob. And as I mentioned, folks, we'll hear a little bit more about Adlumin at the end of the session, but let's dive in. This Colonial Pipeline breach really got an awful lot of attention in the news, correctly so. And there was information about the ransomware, if it could have been a Russian or other foreign entity agents who did it. Was it something that had a dramatic effect on the nation's infrastructure? So Rob, put in kind of in your context, what exactly happened? What took place with the Colonial Pipeline breach that, from your perspective, based on everything that you've been able to, define from the news reports?
Yeah, obviously this breach had a big impact, not just to, the East Coast's, gas infrastructure, and the gasoline people, pump into their cars, but obviously the United States from a security posture, from even a policy and foreign policy perspective. The target was a significant target, but the reality is the tactics are exactly like the ransomware developed tactics that you see from other groups today. What's interesting, what is most interesting about this particular breach is that you can really track all the little mistakes that took place over time that eventually led to ransomware being deployed on target systems. But once ransomware is deployed, that's really the last, that's the last straw, right? That is the end of the line, right? There are so many things that occur before that. In this specific breach, I think what's important to note is the account, or the breach of Colonial Pipeline, who was responsible for it was one single account and a VPN access to that account. And you've got some failures that occurred over a period of time. First, after you listen to the Senate testimony, you'll understand that the Colonial organization actually thought that this account was no longer enabled. It was no longer active. This was an old account that no one was really even tracking anymore, right? They thought it didn't even exist. So, what is that failure there, right? It's an account management failure, right? They couldn't keep track of their stale accounts. They didn't know how old the passwords were for their particular accounts. In most highly regulated organizations, these are compliance violations, right? These are things that you're supposed to be tracking. But we wouldn't still be talking to them if at every single organization, customer organization that we deploy into doesn't have a problem here. We're batting 1,000, as they say, on customers that struggle with this. And so this is really the first failure in a long chain of events, is that the account responsible for breaching the Colonial Pipeline organization was an account they thought wasn't even in place, it didn't even exist. The second is darknet exposure. It just so happened that this account was so old enough, and the account was actually using a very complex password, but we're all humans. We all love to reuse passwords, because humans love to reuse passwords. And the fact of the matter was this one account that happened to be good on the VPN, he also liked to reuse his passwords. And he used that one password on a whole bunch of other websites for his account with his email. And it turns out that those other websites were breached, and that password then became available. So it wasn't even, cyber sleuthcraft for a phishing email that captured this guy's password. It wasn't any fancy technique. It was just a public breach that exposed this particular specific user's account and this specific password. You could go download that password today, and as of a couple months ago, 4 or 5 months ago, you also could have logged into the Colonial Pipeline computer network as well, right? In the next phase of that attack, now the attacker, using darknet exposure, is able to compromise a password, right? And now, he's got to check if that password is valid. He needs access to the network. Of course, the easiest way is just to, hunt down the VPN access point for a particular organization and test the password. Turns out he goes to the VPN authentication terminator, puts in the email username and password, and guess what? He's allowed to authenticate, right? Now Charlie's in the wire, right? So he's gained access to that computer network itself, and from that point, the rest is just kind of history. It's using normal techniques, not even fancy techniques, just remote desktop, just like you or I would use remote desktop on your own network, surfing around to different computers, installing malware to run weeks in advance. So most of these ransomware groups now, they gain access exactly this way. It's all VPN access. I compromise O365 or cloud email. I compromise VPN. I log into the network. I use RDP to surf around to computers, and then I install ransomware to run 4 weeks later. The reason they schedule it to run 4 weeks later is because chances are you don't have logs that go back 4 weeks. So when the ransomware actually runs, the breach that had occurred was a month prior, and you're kind of left with your arms up in the air saying, I don't know what happened. I'm looking at the logs and I don't see anyone logging in, right? I don't see anyone accessing anything, and that's because the reality was they were there a month prior, and your logs have rolled over, and you no longer can even see where and when they came in.
So Rob, it almost sounds too easy. It wasn't a brute force attack. It wasn't a sophisticated phishing scam. It was a stale account and a breached and leaked password that was available for the bad guys to get to. So let's deep dive on that. What were some of the missteps, the deficiencies that could have changed this situation? That, and I think you spoke to some of them. Let's now walk through some of these.
Yeah, the first I hit stale account, right? You got to stay on top of who your old employees are, and what employees no longer need access, and what employees haven't used their account in the past X number of days or months, whatever, compliance objectives or whatever just kind of security objectives you're trying to meet. If that account had been terminated like it should have been, problem solved. We wouldn't be sitting here giving this webinar. Colonial breach wouldn't have happened, right? And it's a lack of introspection into into what stale accounts they have, what old accounts are not in use anymore, what inventory of accounts they even have. Most people don't even have a really good inventory, right? And so that's really the first failure, right? If you stayed on top of just that alone, forget darknet exposure, forget VPN, access analytics, forget the ability to sense, anomalous lateral movement, forget all of those. Just doing that alone stops this breach from occurring, right? The next is, you're getting a little more advanced, but if you want to stay proactive, you want to get out ahead of account takeover type attacks, credential stuffing type attacks. What happens is these websites get breached, people reuse their passwords and potentially link their email accounts to them as well. And those become valid login credentials at legitimate organizations that could even persist for years, depending on how often you change passwords. And so, darknet exposure is getting out there, being able to synchronize in all this breach information, all this data breach information, and then be able to link that to the accounts that you actually have in the organization to surface areas where you may be vulnerable, that there may be password reuse. And frankly, just a simple comparison. John Smith's password was breached on this website 3 months ago. His password is 6 months old. There is an opportunity there. The password in this case precedes the date of the breach, right?
Right.
So it's very legitimate threat, a very real threat. And so if you just get out ahead of that, right? You just get out ahead of that and you stay on top of those open source data breaches, because that's where these criminals are getting information from. It's low hanging fruit. Just, all right, new data breach out. Let's download a list of the emails and passwords that are associated with breach. Let's hunt through those email extensions and find interesting organizations to us. Oh, Colonial Pipeline, that's an interesting organization to me. Let's go ahead and see if any of these usernames and passwords work on Colonial Pipeline. Oh, I found one, right? And then everything just kind of falls from there. So that's next up, very proactive. You're getting a little bit more, sophisticated, being able to integrate that in. Next, external access points, especially now in the pandemic, have become very, very big access points for criminals to circumvent and misuse. The VPN is probably the most notoriously misused, as well as Office 365 or some kind of cloud email. Oftentimes, the authentication for those is all single sign-on. So the same authentication that you use to sign into your cloud email is the same authentication that you would use to sign into your VPN. Very rarely also are those protected by two-factor authentication. A couple of things could have been done here, of course, when you're talking about logging into the VPN. Two-factor authentication could help. Most often people put the two-factor authentication as their email as well. Well, if your cloud emails get been breached in addition to your VPN, that's not going to help you a whole lot. Saying that, it's better than nothing. Using email as a method of two-factor authentication is, of course, better than nothing. And so that's an important factor. But you need to be able to do detection and analytics on who's accessing your VPN. Things like impossible travel, things like foreign country analysis, access analysis, behavior analytics on that VPN. That's an opportunity for detection right there. That is an opportunity for detection. They haven't gained prolific access to the network yet. They haven't gained considerable amounts of access enough to deploy ransomware yet, but things are progressing quickly once they've broken into the VPN, and things will progress pretty quickly after that point as well. And so it's a sense of urgency. Once the VPN has been breached, there should be, without a doubt, a sense of urgency. So there's obviously a lack of detection and analytics on that VPN device. From that point, you've got lateral movement. That's a behavior analytics problem, being able to analyze what users and accounts normally do on a computer network, and then all of a sudden seeing this account move to systems throughout the network that they don't normally move to. In this particular account, you would have seen a large amount of new activity because this account hadn't been used in months, right? It was an account that they thought was disabled. So there should have been some opportunities for lateral movement analytics there. And then, of course, the last step in the chain is the battle at the endpoint, right? And you need to have good EDR solutions, sure, good antivirus solutions, but you also have to be frank about what that means. When it comes to ransomware, the battle of the endpoint is the last battle that you have an opportunity to fight. It's the end. That is the last battle. It's not the first battle that you should have been fighting in pretty much all of these ransomware-based attacks. It's the last battle that you have an opportunity to fight. And so, if you have a failure there, which obviously occurs, Colonial Pipeline had great security tools. They invested $200 million in security over the course of 5-6 years. So it's not like these guys weren't teched out. They were tricked out, quote, tricked out with the best technologies that you have, or that you would think someone would have in security technologies. And yet this still happened. And that's because, the routes that were used were unsophisticated, and they were depending on success at the endpoint when they, potentially after they invested in the endpoint, they should have certainly invested in considerably more technologies to kind of fight and help those other battles before it even reaches the endpoint.
So Rob, really interesting. I mean, you got stale accounts, you got lateral movement, you got impossible travel, you got VPN access, breach credentials, the ability to do forensic review and look at the logs. So you mentioned a lot of stuff. Help us understand, what are the tools that we should be putting in place then based upon what we learned? And what specific actions should our customers and our partners on the call today start thinking about for their own environments, and in the case of our partners, for the customers that they serve?
Yeah, absolutely. So for stale account reduction, it's monitoring and auditing Active Directory. So AD auditing. There's a couple of ways, organizations usually set this up. It might be hybrid cloud. It might be making sure you have Azure Active Directory auditing in place, local on-prem auditing in place. A lot of times people have maybe a separate AD domain that's been set up just for VPN, right? And so you need auditing on these various different domains. And you need to keep track of and stay on top of, what accounts need to be end-of-lifed and terminated because they're no longer even with the organization. Darknet exposure. The reason that this breach occurred via darknet exposure is the reason why we have that module in Adlumin itself. It's because of the very simple understanding that these open breaches occur. People put in their emails and passwords. They reuse these passwords over and over again, and those passwords can absolutely be valid credentials for the legitimate organization that a DarkSide hacker or DarkSide criminal would want access to. And so that is why darknet exposure exists. We go ahead and go out and sweep all this open breach, dark web breach information, bring it in, compare it against the accounts that you have in your organization, compare the passwords against the accounts that you have in your organization, and then we decide whether or not it's a credible or non-credible threat, and surface an alert and even take SOAR action against that account, forcing a password reset at the next logon. So, darknet exposure is, if that password had been changed or then that account deleted, this breach would not have occurred as well. VPN access analytics, that's key. Running impossible travel analytics, running geo distribution analytics on user behavior analytics on who's accessing your virtual private networking terminator from where, when, and how is important. And it's something that we, of course, tightly integrated into Adlumin as well. But just that's probably your biggest vulnerability. Externally, it's a crack in the eggshell for your organization, and it's been made worse a little bit by the pandemic in that you have more people using it, right? A lot more people using remote work and remote logging in or remote access utilities to the organization itself. Lateral movement is internal. That's a user behavior analytics problem. You got to be collecting all the logins from, all these different accounts at scale across your network. You got to be able to run them through algorithms and decide what's normal, what's not, what's linked with process execution that you may consider risky. And you can make, really informed decisions on when things are potentially a problem or look like they're definitely going to be a problem here in the future. The last two are at the endpoint, right? As I've analyzed some of these ransomware attacks, I've noticed a couple of things. One is there's quite a bit of command execution. It's usually fileless based attacks, PowerShell downloads, creating scheduled tasks, on the computer system itself, installing files and services. There are quite a few commands and process execution type activities that occur prior to even ransomware installation, right? Disabling security tools on the system like Windows Defender or your antivirus utility, right? There's quite a bit of that goes on prior to ransomware deployment. And then of course, finally, you have ransomware deployment itself. Adlumin has a ransomware detection as, all of these EDR products and AV products are trying to stop ransomware as it executes as well. That's it. That's the end of the line, right? I come from the Marine Corps, and they had this concept of what's called your final protective fire, your FPF. And so whenever you're setting up some kind of defensive position, you analyze and you come up with your FPF. And your FPF is when you radio in and you're about to be overrun by the enemy, and it's literally the last thing you can do to try and win is to call artillery in on your own organization or pretty much on top of your own head, because that's it. There's nothing else that gives you some safe distance between you and the enemy. That's antivirus detection or even Adlumin detection, frankly, of ransomware executing on a system. It's either going to work or it's not going to work, and you're going to find out real quick which one it is, right? And so, that's important because, frankly, you need to know you got hit by ransomware. Not that those groups certainly won't tell you, because they will find a way to tell you, but that's not a good place to hedge your bets on success.
So Rob, you walked us through what actually happened in the Colonial Pipeline breach. Then you spoke about some of the deficiencies and the missteps, the things that could have been done better or differently. Then you walked us through the actions that we all could take and the specific tools that we could employ based upon that. So that's a perfect segue now into Adlumin, because you're building upon all of the things that Adlumin does and delivers in the platform that you and the team have built. Let's talk about Adlumin as a company. Tell us a little bit about the company itself. What is it that Adlumin does and provides to our customers? And then we'll get a little bit more specific, tying in the things that you just described that companies need with what Adlumin delivers.
So Adlumin is a security and compliance automation platform, or in the security analytics space. We specialize in detecting threats, malfunctions, and IT operations failures, as many other organizations do as well. We do this on a serverless analytics platform, which does have very unique attributes. One, our data scalability is really high. We have no data limitations. There's no EPS limitations or anything like that. We provide our Overwatch service, which is a fully managed compliance detection and response service, and we integrate essentially how to stop this attack all into one platform, and all the different phases of it that occurred over time is built into Adlumin, and it's literally built in there chronologically as well. Everything from detecting and terminating stale accounts, to darknet exposure, to VPN access, to so on and so forth, all the way down to the very end of the line, which is ransomware detection at the endpoint level as well. So that's what our company was designed to do, is integrate these formerly bespoke components of different products and platforms, and realizing that attacks of today are synergistic across all of them. And so we put them all in one portal and brought it all in and made it really cost efficient, easy to use, and simple to integrate.
So Rob, one interesting thing that I see you do when you're speaking to customers is you actually use our platform to show the Colonial Pipeline breach, and you walk through trapping and finding stale accounts, and then you walk through the logs, and then you walk through VPN. So you actually use the platform itself and demonstrate the actual Colonial Pipeline breach and how it could have been impacted with the Adlumin platform. So now let's dive down another level. So what are the specific services that we deliver in the Adlumin platform specifically?
Yep. So first is stale account recognition, alerting, and remediation. All can be automated. And so it's integrating in things like your Azure Cloud or Google Cloud, integrating in Active Directory, top to bottom, every group relationship, every OU relationship, every parent-child relationship that has existed for the past 2 decades in your AD structure is synchronized into Adlumin. And then running that tree and deciding which accounts should stay, which accounts should go. And there's certainly a community decision. When I mean by community, the Adlumin team, and of course the end user customer, making decisions on which accounts need to be there and which accounts can go. Those that should stay, those that should go. I mean, that's step one in stopping this attack. If you were doing those blocking and tackling type activities, you don't have a Colonial pipeline breach, right? The second component is we do have a module in Adlumin called darknet exposure. That module was specifically designed and specifically integrated into our product for this exact reason. A public or open or dark web data breach takes place. That public or open or dark web data breach can, over password reuse, be a problem for your organization, right? And that darknet exposure a module works very well. We even have some SOAR, some security orchestration, automation, and response activities that are that are specifically designed to reset the account's password at next logon, right? To just kind of take risk, have a really low impact way of taking risk completely off of the table. You do that, this breach doesn't progress any further, right? The next thing we do put in place is we're big on log analytics. We have a variety of graph-based algorithms, impossible travel algorithms, foreign access algorithms that are queuing off of VPN access analytics. Who's logging in to your VPN, from where, from when, how, and why. We profile this. We throw alerts based off of analytics that are running across those log data streams. We do pretty often, unfortunately, here at Adlumin, catch breaches that are occurring both via cloud email on something like Azure Active Directory or on the VPN itself. I would say, a couple times a month, our customers, we're detecting breaches across their cloud email or VPN, probably a couple of times a month. So, thank goodness they have our product in place to remediate or, detect these things, frankly, and remediate them, but it happens across our customer base at least a couple of times a month, which is important. I mean, if you're doing that and you're detecting these breaches, this attack doesn't progress any further. If it does progress further, you got to be able to understand, lateral movement within your environment. Adlumin does have graph-based analytical algorithms that are specifically running, designed to detect lateral movement. And we've got some, exciting little visualizations that will show you where the attacker moved inside of the environment, into what systems. When these algorithms are combined with process execution or antivirus event algorithms and detections as well, they become very powerful when those two are married up together. We have SOAR action across VPN, SOAR action across these lateral movement and process execution detections combined, designed to disable accounts automatically, kill processes and files, try and get out ahead of stopping this attack from progressing any further. At the endpoint level, Adlumin is running an XDR solution, an extended detection and response solution, where we're hoovering up not just via an AV integration with your SentinelOne or your CrowdStrike or Sophos or Bitdefender or all the other different antivirus organizations out there, because Windows Defender even, bringing in all of that data and deciding when they have found malware and when they have tried to remediate malware, and then in many cases where they fail to remediate malware. It does happen quite often that, like Windows Defender, or that your AV product will say, I detected malware and I attempted to remediate or quarantine that malware, but I failed to do so. We call this a failed quarantine. And it doesn't happen often, but it does happen, right? And so your ability to respond to failed quarantine is important, right? It is important, on top of, the XDR information that Adlumin is pulling, being able to find threats, malfunctions, and IT operations failures at the endpoint, not just across your AV data stream that you are also ingesting into Adlumin as well. And so we've got great detection at the endpoint. And then finally, of course, you do have ransomware detection. You would hope that this would either come via your antivirus integration with us, Windows Defender or Sophos or SentinelOne or CrowdStrike or any of those other ones. Carbon Black says, I found ransomware and I stopped it. That's the best case scenario. Adlumin alerts and it says Carbon Black found, ransomware and it stopped it. We also have our own detection. Our own detection is really, ransomware is running on the system, and just you need to prepare yourself, right? And we can go ahead and take a swing at it, but at that point, like, things have progressed so far, it's running successfully. Antivirus has failed to stop it. We've detected it. We'll give it a go at stopping it, but at that point, there's a lot of failures that have taken place, as you can see, across this entire chain, starting with stale account reduction and ending with ransomware execution.
So you built a fully featured, robust platform that is across multiple attack vectors, across a very wide attack surface, including the things that we see all the time, like the stale accounts and lateral movement and ransomware and all the things that are top of mind for all of the customers and partners that we have on the call today. So Rob, key takeaways. What should our customers be thinking about, and what should our customers do, and how should they prepare?
Yeah, the most important takeaway is, I think from this, is you've already made investments. Every single one of you guarantees made investments to the endpoint. You bought EDR tech. Even all the legacy antivirus vendors are all now EDR vendors, right? You've invested there. Now, if you really want to put an end to this, you have to start investing in upstream, because you invested at the very end of the attack pipeline, right? You invested at the very end of that. You've got to invest in detection and response and mitigation strategies upstream. Getting a hold of stale accounts, darknet exposure, right? VPN external access analytics, cloud email analytics. Did you lose me there? Do you have me back?
Hey, Rob, we can hear.
I'm good. Yeah. Sorry, we're having, but I think Jim can't hear me. Okay, good. So, and I was kind of, entering the end of my thought anyways, being that, at the end of my thought is you've got to invest upstream, right? You've got to invest darknet exposure, VPN analytics, lateral movement, a little bit at the endpoint, and getting a hold of stale accounts, because it's those things that are breaking the organization's back. When it comes to ransomware deployment via phishing is not very effective. It's not. It doesn't scale to such a factor inside of the organization that it encrypts enough important stuff to make people pay, right? If you send an attachment and a drive-by download and an exploit at the endpoint and deploy ransomware to the one machine, unless your share drives are grossly misconfigured, which they might be, you're not going to have a huge ransomware problem. They're actually gaining access to your network weeks, a month in advance, and it's significant access. Remote desktoping around, installing things on servers. They like the domain controllers. They hop on the domain controller, and then they RDP to all the other systems and install things, or use GPO on the domain controller to install things for weeks, and then finally have them run. So all of these items are what they are doing, to make ransomware have a tight enough grip on the business operations of the system, or of the organization, to make them pay.
Great. Thank you, Rob. I appreciate it. If you don't mind, we're going to ask you to stick around for some Q&A. I just want to cover kind of next steps for both our customers and our partners who might be on the call today. So, folks, hopefully you got a perspective as to not only what happened in the Colonial Pipeline breach, but with some of the other things that are happening out there. But more importantly, how Adlumin as a platform, as a managed compliance and detection response platform, can help you solve your problems and get ahead of, and also forensically look back at some of the things that may have happened in your environment. We'd invite you to schedule a private tour and a demonstration of Adlumin in the platform. In fact, we can even do a free 2-week, no obligation proof of value, where we will deploy Adlumin in your environment. We'll train you during the deployment and throughout the 2 weeks, and you can start to ingest from all the devices in your network, and you can start to see some of the things that Rob was talking about: stale accounts, or leaked and breached passwords, or account changes, unauthorized account changes, or impossible travel. Some of the things that Rob had mentioned earlier. If you are a partner on the call, and I see we have a bunch of partners on the call as well, and you're not already part of the Adlumin Advantage Partner Program, we invite you to come to our website, and in the partner section, register to become a partner and to learn more about how you can provide the Adlumin service and advantage to your customers and build it as part of your business. And of course, we're going to be doing these thought leadership sessions on a monthly basis, so I ask you to look out for the next one. So schedule a demonstration with us. Schedule a free 2-week, no obligation, proof of value and training, so you can actually see what's happening in your network. And then, of course, if you're a partner, register to become a partner. So with that, let's move to the Q&A phase. As a reminder, everybody, if you do have a question, feel free to put it into the chat or the Q&A panel that you'll see in your GoToMeeting dashboard there. So Rob, let me just take a look at what we have in questions. A question, I'm going to paraphrase this one. Rob, you mentioned user entity behavior analytics. Rob, what is user entity behavior analytics, and what does it mean to a customer?
In its simplest form, behavior analytics is, analyzing the particular usage of an account or an entity. An entity can be a VPN device, an entity can be an endpoint computer system. So it's it's normalizing or getting an understanding of what is normal for that particular account, and then being able to mathematically understand deviations to that behavior pattern. But then a relevance decision has to be made based on those deviations, whether those deviations could represent a threat, a malfunction, or an IT operations failure. You don't just want behavior anomalies. You want behavior anomalies that are relevant, right? And so there does need to be relevance filter at the end of that. And it's a very mathematical thing. There are techniques to use like categorical variable embedding and graph theory, and different algorithms work, autoencoders, different algorithms work best using a different strategy. So an algorithm that you may use for lateral movement and for for VPN or cloud email access is not the right algorithm to use for process execution, for example, right? So there are different ways to solve that problem, and multiple different types of algorithms to use, but fundamentally it's recognizing normal behavior, it's understanding deviations from normal behavior, how significant they are, and then making it pass a relevance test to find out if that deviation represents a threat, a malfunction, or an IT operations failure.
So really, this UEBA is a kind of a critical component of our strategy in the platform to be able to look for anomalous behaviors, and using machine learning and artificial intelligence as a way to look for account, device, and user anomalies. Perfect.
Exactly right.
Perfect. Rob, one more question. Oh, we mentioned managed. Is this a SOC service? And can you tell us about your managed SOC capabilities?
Yep. So it is it can be sold with or without the security operations center. So you can use Adlumin at your organization, or you can use Adlumin with our managed compliance detection and response service. Choice is yours. I recommend you use the managed compliance detection response service because, unless you're going to be up at 3 o'clock in the morning on Christmas Eve, you're going to want someone there, watching your back, right? And so we do provide, that managed compliance detection response service, and they'll respond to cloud email all the way down to the most austere endpoint that you may have in a Starbucks cafe in Africa. That may be your certain use case situation, and we're there to monitor those devices and the activity across them appropriately.
Great. So for anybody who is interested, we'll talk about the platform itself, and we can talk about the 24/7 SOC. And I think that's it. Oh yes, we will be sending a replay of this out to everybody, and contact information if you need it. So let me say one last call. Any other comments or questions from anybody before we adjourn? I think that's it. Okay, Rob, thank you very much. We appreciate the insight and the perspective from an expert in the field. And again, for all of our customers and partners on the call today, we invite you for a demo, a no obligation POV, and if you're interested in becoming a partner, joining us in the partner program. Again, thank you for attending the session today. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules. We'll follow up with again, as I said, the recording. And if there are any questions or anything we can do, please let us know. So with that, we thank you, and that's the end of the session. Everybody, have a great day. Bye-bye now.